Hello and welcome to Participating in BCEGS, the Building Code Effectiveness Grading Schedule, Part 1, presented by the Hazard Mitigation Bureau at the Iowa Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. This presentation is Part 1 of our BCEGS series, covering an introduction to the program, including the following topics. What is BCEGS? How can a community get a BCEGS classification? What are the uses and applications of BCEGS classifications and BCEGS data? How does a community continue its development of building codes and BCEGS in hazard mitigation programs? Part 2 of our BCEGS series will cover a more in-depth review of the BCEGS survey and point system. So, what is BCEGS? BCEGS, the Building Code Effectiveness Grading Schedule, is designed to measure resources and support made available for the enforcement of building codes and the utilization of those resources at the community level. BCEGS is a program that evaluates building departments throughout the country. Evaluations include the review of your adopted building codes, practices, and building code enforcement, with an emphasis on local mitigation of losses from natural hazards. The BCEGS survey collects points of data that are used to calculate two classifications or grades. The first one is residential, 1 and 2 family. The second is commercial and/or industrial, known as non-residential. Completion of the survey will result in a score that ranges from 0 to 100 that represents a classification on a scale of 1 to 10. The highest scores result in a classification of 1, representing an exemplary commitment to building code enforcement. The BCEGS classification is a scoring of your code administration program, plan review process, and field inspection staff and procedures. This program is administered by Verisk Insurance Services Office, or ISO. You may be familiar with other ISO community mitigation programs, which include BCEGS, FEMA's Community Rating System, or CRS, and the Fire Suppression Rating Schedule, known as the Public Protection Classification, or PPC. BCEGS, CRS, and PPC programs are specific to building departments, floodplain management programs, and fire protection services that are administered by the local jurisdiction. Notably, ratings from each of these programs can factor into insurance rates. A rating from the BCEGS program can be an indicator of a community's vulnerability to loss from natural hazards. With more modern building codes and effective code enforcement, a community is more resilient, with a lower vulnerability to natural hazards. With weakened or no building codes and/or poor or no code enforcement, a community is more vulnerable to natural hazards. The data collected by participating communities is important to insurance providers, but also to FEMA. A more resilient community is reflective of current code adoption and amendments that do not weaken the building codes. Through research and data, it has been proven that natural hazard-resistant building codes save lives and help to protect your investment. For example, the study described in Natural Hazard Mitigation Saves, 2018 Interim Report, demonstrates that designing buildings to meet the 2018 International Residential Code and the 2018 International Building Code leads to a national benefit of $11 saved for every dollar invested, in comparison to older generations of building codes. How are BCEGS scores used? They're factored into insurance ratings and underwriting. They're used for code advocacy with the International Code Council, or ICC. They're utilized in academic studies. The ranking system for FEMA grant applications includes BCEGS participation information and building code iterations. For example, BCEGS classifications are a factor in the National Flood Insurance Program's Community Rating System, or CRS. CRS offers a discount on flood insurance policies. As a FEMA program prerequisite, discounts of 15% to 45% require BCEGS participation, with a starting classification of 5 or better for both residential and non-residential. BRIC, BRIC, or Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities, is a nationally competitive FEMA grant opportunity that offers funds to help communities finance hazard mitigation projects. BRIC applications factor BCEGS participation into project rankings. FEMA has also used information about community building code enforcement efforts in its loss avoidance studies. These studies determine losses avoided due to hazard mitigation actions. BCEGS data is used in FEMA's Building Code Adoption Tracking System, or BCAT, to inform policy decisions and share data about efforts toward code adoption with regional partners. In summary, BCEGS data is used for insurance rating and underwriting, code advocacy, FEMA grant programs, resiliency and mitigation efforts, academic studies, and the Community Rating System program. Here's a look at the 2019 data for Iowa compared to the national average on population served by building code enforcement, average department expenditure per capita, average department employees training expenditure, and average training expenditure as a percentage of overall department expenditure. You can read more about the BCEGS program state by state with the 2019 publication of the National Code Assessment Report. This is available on the ISO website and will be linked as a reference at the end of this session. As you can see in the upper right corner, Iowa scores 5 on commercial and 6 on residential, 5 being the better score. Lower down, although it's not as legible here, the fact sheet notes that Iowa spends less per capita served and less on training as a percentage of building department expenditures compared to the national average. How does a community receive a BCEGS score? When you request participation in a BCEGS survey, a review of your codes, administration staffing credentials, residential and non-residential plan review, and field inspection procedures will be completed by your state's BCEGS specialist. The survey point system is 0 to 100 points for residential and 0 to 100 points for non-residential. You'll receive a separate classification or grade for residential and non-residential. When point scores are assigned, a grade or classification of 1 to 10 is earned based on the point score. The highest point range earns a classification of 1, the best ranking in the BCEGS survey. When a community elects to participate for either residential or non-residential buildings, but not the other, a grade or classification of 99 is assigned for the category that is not surveyed. This should not be confused with a survey score of 99, which would correspond to a classification of 1. Rather, it's a grade outside the 1 to 10 scale. Similarly, when a community elects to not participate in a BCEGS program at all, a grade or classification of 98 is assigned. Again, this is a classification, not a score, and it represents a lack of data. Since this is a two-part classification, you can receive a review and classification that references a score or value based on non-participation. For example, you can have a residential classification and not a non-residential classification, and vice versa. When your BCEGS survey is finalized, the credit is applied to an insurance rating that varies by state. BCEGS ratings could lead to higher technical criteria scores, which increase opportunities for competitive projects through grant funding. The average BCEGS classification in the state of Iowa is 5 and 6, 5 for non-residential and 6 for residential. Let's demonstrate how this applies to FEMA BRIC grant applications specifically. The Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities grant application is a nationally competitive grant opportunity. A sub-applicant with a BCEGS classification from 1 to 5 will receive 20 points as part of the technical review on its grant application. This credit increased from 15 points for fiscal year 2020. Future years may also be different. The BCEGS classification used in this scoring is the sub-applicant's highest classification. For example, the state of Iowa would receive points for a Class 5 with its current 5 and 6 BCEGS classifications. Here are some of the factors that can impact your ability to score well in the BCEGS program. Outdated building codes, that is, building codes based on ICC versions more than 6 years old. Currently, the 2021 and 2018 ICC series are applicable. Codes based on older versions are beyond the 6-year limit. Requiring non-residential plan review, but not residential plan review, or vice versa. Staff qualification, certificates, training, and education. Field inspection procedures, planning and land use regulations and floodplain development regulations, or not completing an updated BCEGS survey every 5 years as part of a program requirement. How do you request a BCEGS survey? To make a formal request or just to get started with more information, you can contact a BCEGS mitigation specialist at 1-800-444-4554 or by email to bcegs_info@verisk.com. You will be put in contact with your BCEGS specialist for your specific area or state. Here are some questionnaire tips while you start your journey. Request a pre-application meeting with your BCEGS representative. Review your completed draft questionnaire with ISO in advance. If you're planning to adopt updated building codes, discuss the schedule of your adoption. If you're planning any updates to your inspection procedures, implementing checklists, plan review inspection software, those are great topics to talk about with ISO ahead of your meeting. You can also hyperlink directly to your regulations. Paper copies are not required. Provide a copy of the job posting and job description with each employee questionnaire. Identify any levels of education and certification that are required for the job position and duties. You can provide a master log of credentials and certifications and completed continuing education courses for each staff member. A copy of each certification of completion is not required. It is the cumulative hours of training and course completion utilized for the review. Let's take a quick look at the two questionnaires that are the basis of your BCEGS survey. The first one is the BCEGS questionnaire. It is 17 pages. It's a question and answer document that covers the daily responsibilities of department staff, the enforcement of adopted regulations, etc. The second survey is the BCEGS employee data sheet. This is a one-page questionnaire that is specific to each department staff member. This may include your chief building official, plans examiner, or field inspection staff. The employee sheet is not required for administrative staff or your permit technicians. Download the two current checklists that are required for your survey online from the BCEGS website. Each portion of the survey is critical to how your program is scored. Take advantage of talking to your ISO or BCEGS representative ahead of time. Completing a draft of the questionnaire will help aid in having an understanding of the documentation before your formal survey meeting. It will also help your BCEGS representative provide supportive guidance in advance. Remember, your BCEGS survey is based on the information that you provide in the questionnaire. For more information on the BCEGS program or other ISO administrative programs, please visit isomitigation.com/BCEGS. To request a visit or for more information, contact them directly. Reference material from today's presentation includes ISO facts and figures about BCEGS grades around the country, the ISO 2019 National Building Code Assessment Report, and FEMA Building Science. Thank you for your time today. We hope you find this information helpful as you help your community become more resilient.